We are back at it, the Recovered Addict podcast. Jason Rigby and
Duane Yardman-Frank.
Yes, and I want to get into today. We're going to go right into the ego. This is going to be cool. So if you're an addict, then there's a part of you that's called the ego that plays a role in this addiction. And that's what we're going to get into. The role, it's playing a role on a stage, the role of the ego in addiction. And it says this: the ego in psychological terms refers to the conscious mind that mediates between the individual and reality. So what is reality? Duane, I'm going to throw a big. What is reality?
Well, if I'm behaving in my addiction, usually reality is all about me.
And the me is the ego.
Yeah, you know how an addict's alarm clock goes off in the morning? Me.
That's so
we
good,
like to
yes,
say
yeah.
all the time, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about.
That's all I think about.
Yeah, so I have a skewed version of reality. Usually, if I'm behaving in my addiction, if I'm behaving in my ego, I'm not capable of seeing reality. I don't really know what that is. The world and its people are here to serve me. That's what I thought. Aren't you here for me? What do you got? I'm ready.
I just need to get mine because the world is cruel.
I'm here for me.
And I need to get as much money as I can make, and I need to have as much fun as I want, and I'm just going to do everything about me. And subconsciously, that's not the real you. But the ego has you fooled into thinking that that's the real you. So it says this, and I think this is really good. It is the part of our psyche that is primarily responsible for our sense of identity and self-worth. So the ego's not bad.
No, the ego's not bad. And it's important to also understand, I'm never getting rid of it. We don't want to view the ego as an adversary. We don't want to view the ego as this thing I need to remove from my life. It's important to understand it's a normal part of the human brain, the functionality of my consciousness. Ego is going to be there. It lives in my mind. It couldn't possibly live anywhere else. I'm not ever going to get rid of my mind. So we don't get very far when we try and fight it. It's just like saying, I circulate my blood. I digest my food. Hold on, Jason. I need to tell myself to digest my food right now. Hold on. And that's not the way those organs work. That's not the way the mind works either. I don't say I think my thoughts. Thoughts just happen. The ego just is. It's going to be there. I'm not going to, it's important that we all understand that. I'm not going to get very far trying to fight the ego.
No, yeah, and the ego played a big role, especially back in the day, and so we have, if we look at evolutionary psychology, especially back in the day, I mean, it protected you, like the fight or flight. Like if you're running from a cheetah, you need your ego.
It's important, and it will save my life.
Right.
It's necessary. Again, we're not ever going to get rid of it.
And I think, so looking at what a healthy ego is, I think is really important. But understanding the ego plays a lot of different roles. The ego helps me win a basketball game. Like you just played basketball and you said you were pretty sore for...
3 days. After a few hours after that game, I couldn't walk. I hadn't played 5-on-5 basketball in full court in over a decade. But my ego said, you got this.
Yeah,
Give it everything you got.
So and you wouldn't have even tried if you had no ego.
No, and that experience was a blast. It was very enjoyable for me.
Right. Yes.
I felt present, and I was definitely existing in reality.
And you ski too. So the ego says you got this. You can handle this mountain. If you didn't have an ego, it would just. The ego can also tell me, you've never skied before, Jason. This potentially could be super dangerous. You don't know what you're doing, so don't go on that ski lift to that very dangerous, I don't even know what they call them, trails or
You're right.
runs or, whatever they call them. So the ego plays a very good role in our psyche and the sense of identity and self-worth. This is where we get hijacked. This is where the ego starts to play. It's your little friend that comes up alongside of you as a 1-year-old. And because I always look at it as a baby as ultimate selfishness.
Yes.
A baby is all in their ego 100%. It's like, I'm going to cry. I'm going to do whatever I want because I right now feel uncomfortable. And I need all these people to serve me. That's kind of like, I've always looked at like a baby you have a 2-year-old.
I have a 2-year-old. And
they call it terrible tools for a reason.
A baby is not capable of surviving without outside help. So a baby needs to be selfish. A baby needs to be the center of the universe. Otherwise, they literally are not going to survive. But if that behavior persists past a functional age of now I can fend for myself, then I'm acting in my ego. Then I'm the center of the universe. Then I still have an unconscious belief that everyone else is supposed to behave to cater to me. I'm used to everyone catering to me.
Only children have this. Since,
yes,
baby.
Only children have this a lot. The appropriate role for a parent is to be an excellent role model for their child. And an excellent parent takes responsibility for themselves. How do I be a good parent? I take responsibility for myself, which in turn provides an excellent role model for my child. It's not give the child everything they want.
Right.
That's not the best type of parent. It's just not. I'm crippling the child.
Yeah, they were asking this. This guy had hundreds of millions of dollars, and they were asking him the other day. I thought this was really cool. Side note, real quick, how he parents his kids to try to prevent them from being, you have hundreds of millions of dollars, you're set for life, you have generational wealth. So how do you like keep your kids from being spoiled? And he goes, I've really thought about this. Like I've done in depth. He says, one is not to give your kids everything, like you just said. Number two is to have them earn things. And then allow them to understand, to set rules and boundaries and things like that. So he had them every day. They had a pool. So every day they had to swim for like an hour. Then they had to watch before they can watch regular TV, they have to watch a documentary on something that they can learn from. And it may interest them. It may be the Michael Jordan Last Dance documentary, if they like sports, whatever it is, but they have to watch something that's going to make them better. And then they have to work. And I'm not talking like child labor and all that stuff, but I'm talking about they have to do several hours a day of work. And he's like, so far we're batting 1,000. I think he has 4 kids, but batting 1,000 with all 4 of them, being productive. But if you're, and I like the rich kid analogy as looking at it with just being dominated by your ego. It's like everything's been given to you. I have a Rolls Royce. I live in a mansion. Dad's provided everything for me. But what type of person am I? I'm depressed. I'm suicidal. I can't function in the so-called real world because I'm totally disabled. And that's what the ego will do to you. The ego will want your comfort. It wants you to eat the donuts. It wants you to go to the casino. It wants you to pick up the bottle. It wants what's good for you in its limited capacity. That bottle, the ego is like, we've handled lots of problems with this. Let's try this again. We've done this. This is comfortable.
Yes.
Let's grab this bottle and do it again. Oh, now you're blackout drunk. Oh, now you're in the hospital, Duane. Which you've experienced.
That's my story. That's my exact story right there.
Yeah. So the material says, however, when the ego becomes overly dominant, this is what I want you to talk to. When the ego becomes overly dominant, it can lead to a host of issues, including addiction.
Yeah. My world is chaos when I'm behaving in my ego. I'm ruled by selfish and self-centered decisions, thoughts, and obsessions. And if I don't have a way out of that, if I don't have an outlet, if I don't have an avenue of service, why would I be of service to somebody else? I'm here to be of service to me. I didn't even know that was an option. It's a pretty paradoxical thought for an addict to help somebody else. I'm just interested in getting mine. And that type of behavior creates a lot of suffering, discomfort, disconnect, and I don't have any sense of self-worth. I was never presented an opportunity to take responsibility for my inner peace, my inner being, for how I'm feeling on the inside. The gentleman that's raising those 4 kids, I try and have a similar practice with my kids. They have their chores around the house they need to do. They have guidelines, boundaries, and expectations. I try and teach them, inform them of what's acceptable, not acceptable. And with one of our kids, we even are doing a reward system where if they get these chores done, then they get like a token. It's like a pretend piece of gold. Right. And then if my son acquires 5 pieces of gold, he can cash those in for an experiment. So it's a little, external reward there. But at the same time, we're teaching him work ethic. We're teaching him delayed gratification. You don't get the you don't get the treat right away. You don't get to go to the ice cream parlor with one gold coin. You have to work for it. You have to earn it. You have to. It's on you. If you don't do the chores, sorry, you're the one that doesn't get it.
Yeah, that's so good.
You didn't take action. So we're teaching responsibility. We're teaching a sense of purpose. We're teaching boundaries. We're teaching consequences. And if I'm not presented with those opportunities, of course, I'm going to be a selfish, self-centered individual. Selfish, self-centered individual loves to live in their ego. And it's easy for that ego to lose its function, its original function of fight or flight. I need to keep myself safe, work hard. We want to win this. We're in a competition. Those type of original functions, those type of natural functions can be taken to an extreme if I'm in a delusional lifestyle of addiction.
So whenever we look at the ego becomes overly dominant. So it hijacks, and for majority of people, they're living in their ego.
Absolutely.
And it's become overly dominant.
Yeah.
Instead of, and you had said something before, and I thought it was so good, the spirit and the ego, the spiritual side and the ego. Can you kind of explain that a little bit and the submissiveness to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like we've discussed in the past, a good way of understanding for me and a nice spiritual tool that we have in our toolkit is horizontal dimension of existence, vertical dimension of existence. Horizontal existence is the world of form, is the world of job, relationship, money, anything form-based exists in my world, my horizontal world.
What most people believe that's it. That's the world.
That's it. And we would also say human. So human form exists in that horizontal. And then if you enter vertical dimension, enter world of spirit, source, God consciousness, we could also say being. So we're human, world of form, where the ego lives, and being, where my spirit lives. So we're both. It's very important to understand that we're human beings. I'm not ever going to just get rid of the human part and be total Buddhist monk floating on a mountain and that's it. I don't even need to eat anymore because I'm just pure spirit. It's important to honor both. Honor the part of me that is form, that is human. Honor the part of me that is being, that is spirit. The correct place for us is the marrying of the two. We want them to blend together. And in my opinion, the ideal is to have the spirit foremost in that marriage, and to have the ego submissive to my spirit. They're working in coherence, they're working in agreement, but the ego understands source gets to make this decision.
So allowing the spirit, or for me, higher self, that's kind of how I look at it, allowing my higher self to be the dominant force in everything I do, because I'm understanding that as eternal wisdom. I'm understanding that as, God or whatever it may be. That is what needs to be overly dominant, not the material, not the ego.
In addiction, it's the ego that is dominant. It's the ego that says, this will work now, do it. Don't seek spiritual solution. If I'm trying to fill a God-sized hole inside of me, it takes work.
Yes.
It takes work touching spirit. It takes work tapping into a different perspective of life that's going to enable me to feel free instead of feel fear, instead of feel in bondage. I'm just bent up. I'm totally limited if I'm coming from my ego, and I'm unconscious to it. If I'm unconscious to it, it usually means I'm behaving in my addiction.
Yeah, and overly dominant ego, I want you to share the story if you don't mind. You've shared it with me offline before, is, you were sober for a while, and then there was a time frame where you weren't, and then you happened to meet someone, and they had a conversation with you, and you didn't even realize it at the moment until they shared with you, but you were in the overly dominant ego stage. Yeah,
absolutely. It's funny how my selfish, self-centered behavior in the world, when I behave that way in the world, usually the world will kick my ass in response to my destructive behavior. And one of our great analogies is I'm living such a destructive, addictive lifestyle. I'm actually in the gutter.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm in the gutter. I'm bleeding. And the ego is so powerful and rebuilds so quickly. I'm in the gutter. I'm bleeding. And I'm still judging people's shoes as they walk by because I want to be superior. She shouldn't
so
be wearing
good,
those
yes.
heels. She look at her. She gotta wear those heels. And
Yeah,
I'm in the
exactly.
gutter bleeding from my addiction. So yeah, I had an experience where I was 5 months, 20 days sober. I was very lucky and graced to be around spiritual teachers that were helping me at that time in my life. I was working a couple jobs. I didn't have many spiritual tools at the time. I didn't have enough spiritual tools at the time to disidentify from my ego. My ego said, more money is going to make this better. You probably need to work even more. So I was putting in 80, 88-hour work weeks and getting burnt out, burning the candle at both ends. My ego, the part of me that is unconscious, said, cocaine would make this a lot easier. And I returned to drugs. I don't know, 20 minutes later, I returned to alcohol. 5 months, 20 days was out the window.
Yeah, isn't that amazing how?
Yes. And because of my destructive behavior, I picked it right back up exactly where I left off.
So the ego said, this is the upper limit problem too. The ego turned around and said, you know what? You've been working 80 plus hours. You've been doing so good. You deserve a treat, Duane.
If you have this treat.
Let's get you some nose candy.
Yeah, nose candy will help you work even more. Is what my ego said.
Yeah.
My
So it was
ego
like,
said you could work more.
Did you
energy.
have the thought at all? Was it just so unconscious? It was just, I want this, I'm going to take it now. Or was it like, I think I could handle this?
I didn't have the thought of, I think I could handle this. I just was not well practiced enough to come from vertical dimension first. I was not making decisions based out of my spirit. I was making decisions based on the world of form, out of my ego,
and just pure emotion. Oh man, that sounds awesome. Let me go. I got money.
I want more money.
Right.
If I get so the money was making me feel better. I wasn't drunk. I thought, well, I just need more money. I'm going to feel even better.
Because this is really important right now at this stage. Because I think there's a lot of people that are listening to this or watching this that are at this stage right here, where their ego is tricking them and thinking that they got it.
Correct. Yeah. The delusion.
And you may be 5 months sober. You may be 5 days sober. You may be 5 years sober. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's scary how quickly the ego will rebuild. My addiction will administer a good beating. And usually that good beating puts me in a position of submission. And after that position of submission, I come in asking for help. Please, I'm willing to live different, but then I'm right back to my old ways because I don't have the tools to retrain or rebuild the structure that is destroying my life. That structure exists in my mind. That structure is conditioned. That structure is my selfishness. That structure is my uncontrolled ego. My ego foremost, not my spirit. So 5 months, 20 days sober, get a little cocaine, get a little alcohol. The way that I participate in my addiction took me 2 weeks to get into the hospital.
So you went hog wild. That's your thing.
I don't know any other way to go.
100%.
I have 2 speeds, all or nothing. Makes me very successful in business, makes me very deadly in my addiction. So I got as close to dying as I ever want to get. God willing, that was my bottom. That was my last drink. That was
for 13 years. That was your last drink.
Yeah, that was 13 years ago. And
you had a spiritual teacher that
so I had
did something to you.
So I was already exposed to some spiritual teachers by grace, and I came in and saw this spiritual teacher. Now this was a tough man. This was a rough man.
Old school.
His name is Dick, and Dick was dying of COPD, and he was on oxygen, and he sounded like Darth Vader. He would.
That's crazy.
You knew where you were spiritually if you spent any time with Dick, and because he would rub people the wrong way. They would just be furious being in his presence. They're like, I can't stand that. And so if you weren't on good spiritual terms, you were bothered by your outside world. And anyways, Dick had done time in Leavenworth State Penitentiary He was convicted of attempted murder of a police officer. They gave him 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah, this was a hard man. And he died 70 years old, 10 years sober. And I had the gift of getting to be in his hospital room with him as he passed away. And I've done that with a couple people, a couple spiritual advisors that have helped reshape my life. And Dick was one of the first men that helped me. And, I came back after that trip to the hospital. My ego had already rebuilt. When Dick was in prison in Leavenworth, he was doing a construction job to get his sentence lowered. And a big cinder block had fallen on this construction site, landed on his hand, and severed his index finger.
Ooh.
Dick was a hard man. He picked up his severed finger, jammed it back on his nub, and then went to the infirmary, and the infirmary sewed it on. But they sewed it on all crooked and messed up. These are not like professional doctors. It's just a prison. And anyways, he was interested in living a paradoxical lifestyle in his recovery. He was interested in helping other people. He knew if he was of service to others, he was coming from spirit rather than coming from ego. And I saw him that day after I got out of the hospital, and he said, Duane, I'm so glad to see you. I was worried about you. And my ego had already rebuilt, and I said, really what was going on was a lot of guilt and shame, and I didn't know how to communicate that. And I said, yeah, I'm glad to see you too, Dick. I got it. I think I got it this time. And Dick hit me real hard in the chest with his nubby little index finger. And he said, you don't have shit. God has it.
That's awesome.
Completely crushed my ego. I was vulnerable enough at that moment from the beating alcohol had just administered me that I was willing to listen. And I heard him say, this old man dying on oxygen with a broken body and messed up finger. I heard him say, you don't have it. You can't do this. You can try as much as you want, but you're not going to be able to figure this out. God has this.
Yeah,
the spirit inside of me has this.
That's so good. Yeah.
He saved my life.
That's so wild.
With that little nubby finger.
And then you never drank since.
And that moment of truth.
Yeah. And you don't know what that moment of truth can be for someone.
You never know.
So that's why you're just constantly in service to others. What I learned about the story, one of the things that is so beautiful about it is, and people don't realize this, I don't think, with the ego, because it's such a trickster. That's what I look at it as, like just tricking you all the time.
Yeah.
That guilt and shame that you experienced, guilt and shame is a direction of ego.
Absolutely.
You're in full bore, taking over, like alien invasion. Like the ego has took over if you're in guilt and shame.
Yeah. One of the best examples of my ego is, there's an alien invasion. They're coming for me. Out of 8 billion people on the planet,
Yeah.
I'm the superior being
yes.
that they want to abduct. and it has nothing to do with me. They're not interested in studying me.
Well, it's so funny, like even with drugs and stuff like that, I've never taken any drugs. I've done like some edibles and stuff like that, but I've never, like, I'm too fearful of it. But like how it makes you all about you. Just paranoia alone. Thinking that the cops are worried about you.
Yes. Thinking
that people are out to get you.
Yeah.
That's all the hijacking of the ego. It's making you the center of attention for everything.
Often a lot of substances increase sense perceptions. Vision is increased. Hearing is increased. That's what it's so easy to get addicted to.
Mm-hmm.
The outside world around me is like, wow, this is incredible. It's like, it's a tree. It's a leaf. Yes, it is incredible. You can get there without drugs.
Mm-hmm.
But when sense perceptions are increased, it's very easy for the mind to start taking over and trying to compute, trying to make sense of these increased sense perceptions. So I get lost in the mind, which if I'm behaving unconsciously in my addiction means I'm also lost in my ego.
So the mind is taking over, and the next thing you know, you're seeing rats, or you're worried that the cops are right outside your door, different things like that.
I know the side effects of staying up all night long doing cocaine. You get ninjas on the lawn. You're constantly peering out the window to see if the ninjas are there, if the cops are there. No one ever came for me, but I knew someone was coming to get me.
Yeah, and that's it. That to me, it's just a revelation. But being passive aggressive, being where you're sacrificing. Oh, I just have to do so much for my kids all the time. It's just, I just do so many things for them, and they just never realize all the sacrifices I make. That's all ego. The
Absolutely.
guilt.
Absolutely.
It's just tricking you, and people get mad about this. I used to get mad about it because I was so into my self-pity. I would go down the rabbit hole of self-pity that it would lead to depression. But I was so into self-pity and so into how much of a victim I was and how every single person I ever interacted with would take advantage of me.
Yes.
Like every single person. Well, obviously, it's not the people's problem. It's my problem. One, why am I attracted to people taking advantage of me? That's the first question you ask yourself. Number two, it's like, why is every single person, my parents, my sister, my family, the people why is every boss mean and always just making me work so many hours? Well, it was the illusion of my mind. My boss a lot of my bosses they're so busy, they're not concerned about me. They're not thinking about me. But I'm obsessed that they're seeing me slave away.
Very good.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Very good.
I want people to understand a lot of your thoughts, 90% of them are ego-based.
Absolutely. And this is a large component of what we're addicted to.
Mm-hmm.
It may be whatever, any substance, doesn't matter what we're taking. For me, it was the alcohol. For me, it was the cocaine. But the thoughts that arose from the unconscious ego taking over, and then the energetic response, the emotions, the chemicals that were released as a result of those thoughts, that becomes the addiction. I become addicted to the energetic response of fear. I become addicted to the energetic response of, we have to fight these people. All these people are against me.
I feel so good as I'm driving to the casino.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm gonna do a 24-hour poker game.
Yes. We say if you've met 4 assholes before lunch, you're probably the asshole.
That is so good, bro.
The world is not against me. They're not here to. Do you know what most people think about? You do. They think about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're not wasting any time thinking about me.
No, they're not at all.
Yeah, but my ego says, you better behave in a particular way because he, and he, they're all thinking about you. Now start to align your behavior as such.
But that's so freeing. It's freeing when you can get out of that rat race in your head of you being the most important thing in everybody's minds.
Very good.
Because now if you can take that space, like you talked about our last podcast, if you could pull yourself away from that emotion and be in that aware space, now you can begin to look at it and you can be like, oh my God, my ego's been tricking me. I've been living in this fear and I've been taking people's opinions as the reality of who I am. And I've been putting them all together, even to the point like a mom or a dad or whatever that's just obsessed over their kids.
Yes.
And they live for their kids and their kids become a god, an idol. We've talked about this before. And so when their kids leave, they have no identity. You see couples separate, like they've been married for 25 years, 30 years, and then they separate when their kids are gone because their whole identity was put into their children.
Absolutely.
And so they needed their kids to function. They needed those events, and it's so crazy. You see it with the crazy dad that goes to the football game and he has his son, he's like, and he's going crazy and, he looks like that asshole. Mm-hmm. That is, he's not there. His ego is there for him. He's using the kid.
Very good.
For him to be there.
Yes.
It's all about him in that stage because you're not supporting your child. In fact, you're being cruel to your child by forcing them to do something that they may not even want to do. Mm-hmm. It was so hilarious when, I have 3 sons. It was so hilarious. All 3 of them, only one of them wanted to do sports. The other 2 were not. And I gave everybody a choice. Like, what do you want to do? What are you like? What is it that you really, really want to do that makes you productive for society? they all three love mechanics. That was just their thing, and they do that as a profession now. So it's just funny how all three of them got into working on cars or working on, whatever heavy equipment. But if I wouldn't have allowed them to do that and pushed them to do basketball like I did,
yes,
none of them, they didn't even like to play basketball. They had no interest in basketball. Now my ego wants them to play basketball.
It wouldn't have served them. It wouldn't have served you.
Right.
Because you would have been upset that they didn't become the men you thought they were supposed to be.
The men I thought they were supposed to be.
You gave them a gift.
Yes.
By detaching your expectation on their reality.
But I think this is what I'm getting at. When the ego becomes overly dominant, and then the host of issues that our material talks about, it leads to a host of issues, including one of them is addiction. But it leads to a host of issues, and these issues are affecting every single part of your life.
Very good. Yeah, very good.
There's a web of it.
Yeah, to return to our initial conversation, I think it was podcast 1, the first greatest lie of addiction is, this time will be different.
Yes.
This time I'm not going to get arrested. This time I'm not going to lose the relationship. This time it'll be different. The experiment of insanity. Let's try the exact same thing, but this time it'll be different. It was never any different. The second greatest lie of addiction is, well, what's wrong with you is me. Excuse me. What's wrong with me is you. If only you were different, I would be okay. If only the world behaved the way I think it needs to behave, I'm going to be okay. If that's my delusion, and that's easy to come from that delusion if I'm in my addiction, if I'm in my egoic, self-centered mind, for some reason I get a host of issues.
You shared something I thought was really important. You may not even realize it. It was really, really cool, the story you shared. And you maybe share it real quick because it's a small story. But you had said something a couple weeks ago where you had a party. And I had really thought about this because it was really interesting what you said. You said you and your girlfriend were just in flow.
Yeah.
And you guys were just like moving around, and both of you had been in food service, so it'd be easy. So I don't know if you had 20 people, 30 people at your house in backyard, having a summer party, birthday party, whatever it is. And then I began to think about how people get in such big fights and they get so angry, and like before the party and after the party and during the party. And there's people right now that are just had experienced this, that they can't be present and in the moment because ego has to say, I'm doing this party and I'm sacrificing. And don't you realize I stayed up all night to make these hors d'oeuvres, and I made them absolutely perfect. And everybody just ate them really fast because everybody was drunk and they didn't really care. And Jim, spilt he spilt wine on my white carpet. And, Susan did this, and Teresa, can you believe she did this? We're in the moment when you had two people that were spiritually just serving others. You see what I'm saying? There was no like, I can't believe I have to barbecue. You were just happy in the moment. And you had told me, you said you were excited to see how people were talking to each other, like family members that hadn't talked to each other in a while. It was just complete service to others. Yeah,
it was a beautiful experience. So my son had his 7th birthday, and we threw a party at our house. My partner, she put the whole thing together. She's incredible. And it was themed. It had spaceman cupcakes, spaceman balloons, spaceman banners, and
that's normally like a super stressful situation.
It was a themed party. She put it all together. She was the host of this party, and she, for that moment, honored that role. I was able to take a step back, offer my presence instead of offer my judgment. I had like 35 people at my house and kids running around throwing water balloons. My backyard is pristine. She knew better not to tell me that they were going to do water balloons until she was filling up the water balloon. She was like, all right, little plastic pieces can be all over the yard. Are you ready? I already had everyone there. It was not like I
know, but
I wasn't in time to say no.
It could have
easily blown into a fight because my ego wants it to be my way. My ego wants to say, well, what's wrong with me is you guys and your behavior. If your behavior is different, I'll be okay. Just don't throw those water balloons and I'm going to be fine.
Yeah, don't be a kid.
Don't have fun. You couldn't possibly have fun in my backyard. Why are you here? So If I'm coming from horizontal first, if I'm coming from ego first, I'm extremely controlling, I'm extremely selfish. You need to fit my idea of how this is supposed to go. But if I'm coming from spirit first, if I'm coming from source first, if I'm coming from the part of me that is presence, that can be present, and I offer that presence, we talk about this all the time. What's the best thing I can give anyone ever? My presence.
The best thing you can do for an addict, if you're listening to this and you're trying to help somebody, is just offer your presence.
Offer your presence instead of offering my judgment, instead of offering my fear, instead of offering my anger. All those things exist in my ego. Those things don't exist in my presence. If I can offer my presence, it's the best thing I can give anyone because it feels so comfortable being in someone's presence. I can just be who I am. These kids can just be who they are. They can just throw the water balloons. I didn't take a back seat, but I took the role of manning the grill. I cooked a brisket. We had burgers. We had hot dogs going. I was on the grill. She was playing host. We never communicated once at the beginning of this party saying, okay, you talk to the guests and be host and interact. I will cook and be on the grill and cook and take care of the food. That just unfolded organically. And it's cool that you are able to understand the potential that made that available.
Well, what normally happens is, I can't believe, Bill, the wife to the husband, that you're just hanging out in the garage and I've done all this work. I've spent 6 hours getting ready for this party and you don't care. You're just drinking, pre-gaming before the thing, watching, and you're not helped at all. And then the guy's like, well, I don't want to be around her before a party, so I'm just going to go do my own thing. Both are at fault here. It's all ego. Yeah. And then they've gotten into big fights. She's crying while she's trying to figure stuff out. And then one of their close neighbors comes in, and then the close neighbor turns around and is like, are you okay? What's wrong? And she's like, I just kept, being with Bill for 20-something years. And then she's just making both the people, and then Bill's out in the yard just, and with a bunch of guys, sitting there smoking and then talking shit about their wives and how horrible they're. You could just see all ego.
Yep.
None of that was service to others.
All ego and very common.
That's what I'm saying.
I want to leave that relationship also. Too much control, too much chaos. It's not good for anybody.
Yeah, and the material says this: an inflated ego can make us feel invincible, leading us to take unnecessary risk, like experimenting with the disacceptance of our behaviors. And you had talked about this earlier, you at 5 months. An inflated ego makes us feel invincible. And there's a lot of people like, and I've heard this from addicts, I'm talking like drug addicts or whatever, like, I've got this. I think I got it this time. And you had said that too,
Dick. Yeah,
you're like, I got this.
I got it. I think I got it this time. Figure it out on my own. I have some game left. I have some moxie. When he hit me in the chest, he didn't have any other tool at the moment to tell me you're coming from your inflated ego. A large portion of spiritual practice is deflating the ego. It's gassed up enough. My practice now is deflate that ego. A practice of humility is a difficult walk. Be careful. Be careful. If you start asking for humility, I want to make this very clear to anyone that's listening. You're going to get it. So
you're going to get lots of learning lessons.
You're going to get a lot of lessons, a lot of opportunities. I prayed for humility one time. My girlfriend at the time was pregnant 6 months later. So be careful. If you ask for humility, you might get it. Life was no longer about me.
Because there's no problems in life. There's just learning lessons.
Correct. Yeah.
So you're just going to, if you want humility, you're just going to get a bunch of learning lessons, or what we call problems.
Be careful asking for that one. But it is a wonderful spiritual tool to not be the crazy dad on the lawn who can't believe he's with his wife for 27 years because he's not getting his way ever. I'm not at all humble in that moment. Coming from a perspective of just a member of, I'm just a part of. I'm not King Duane, but you didn't get to piss on me either.
Right.
I'm just a part of the
I
crew.
love that.
I'm just right-sized. One of my favorite definitions of humility is being right-sized. The ego does not allow me, my unconscious ego, does not allow me to be right-sized. My unconscious ego is either I'm King Duane, you behave the way I need you to behave, or everybody just pisses on me. I'm the worst thing there is. There doesn't get any lower existence than me. Whether it's really, really negative or really, really positive, if it's selfish, self-centered, it's still ego.
And those oscillate with a person with an addiction personality.
Absolutely.
That's how it happens.
Yeah, you
for
fluctuate
me.
from one to the other.
I could be like,
On a-
this person's the greatest person ever. I love them
Nice.
so much. And then 5 minutes later, it's like, oh my God, I'm so depressed.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I can oscillate that bad with my emotions if I'm not careful. Just some people have more of an empathic
Yeah.
emotion, you know. This I thought was interesting. It says it can prevent us from seeing the truth about our addiction, causing us to deny the problem and reject help from others.
It's a wild tool that the mind has. It's basically like putting a pair of sunglasses over my eyes, like a psychosis. Like my addiction is so powerful. My delusionment in my selfish, self-centered behavior. I need to keep doing what I'm doing because it's the only way I know how to do what I'm doing. I refuse to look at reality. When I have this selfish pair of glasses that come down over my eyes. It's like blinders, like a set of blinders. Like I can't see reality. I'll do what I need to do to get what I want.
The truth about our addiction, and we've talked about this before, but I want people to understand, what is the truth about your addiction, Duane? Like, what's the truth about yours? Like your alcohol and drug abuse, but mainly alcohol, right?
Yeah, we've talked about this a lot, and now we're going to get, I'll be vulnerable, and we're going to get, pretty deep-seated. These are usually stem from deep-seated issues. But the truth about my addiction is I didn't have a way to address the trauma or the uncomfortableness I grew up with. I didn't have a way to address the pain that was living inside of me as a result of my conditioning or as a result of my environment. All I knew was this is not what I want to feel. So alcohol and drugs allowed me to not feel that.
You felt amazing.
I didn't have to feel. Initially, I felt amazing, but then it just turned into I don't have to feel. And the truth of that, as that progresses, the truth of the addiction becomes, I need this in order to be okay.
Just to be okay.
Just to be okay.
Because the pain is so unbearable.
Yeah. I'll lose a job, don't care. I need to be okay. Lose a relationship, don't care. Need to be okay. Spend every cent in my bank account, don't care. Need to be okay.
And so through this pain, this childhood pain that you experienced, it sought itself, the ego came into, it's like the ego's like, Duane, I got you.
Yeah.
We're gonna walk down this road together. We're gonna go down this journey, this ego journey, and it's gonna be we don't have to worry about your pain anymore. I got you. The pain, no more pain. If you do this, you like doing this, do this more.
I didn't have any tools to slay the dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
And we all have this. We all have past. We all have hurt. We all have, life happens. Whether you live a spiritual life or not, life happens. We all have to go through hard stuff.
So tell me, because our material talks about this part, and tell me if this related to what you just said, because I kind of set you up. This is really good. Listen to this. The ego can also lead us to believe that we are unworthy of love, happiness, and recovery, keeping us stuck in the cycle of addiction, unworthiness.
Yes, I definitely experienced unworthiness in the progression of the addiction. I didn't feel that right away. I believe that I've always had the God-centered inner being inside of me. But the more and more dependent I became upon alcohol in order to feel okay, the more I turned away from that part of me, that God-centered piece that already knew I was okay. So this sense of worthlessness, this sense of not good enough, this sense of shame, I needed to get further and further away from that, which made it easier and easier to progress into the disease.
Yeah, and I think for me, the unworthiness part hit me harder because of the trauma that I experienced as a child too. And I think that's pretty much all of it. You know, that's what your blueprint is. That's your matrix. So that's what your judge. If you had a great experience on something, you know, if I go out skiing for the very first time and I have a horrific experience, I probably won't go ski again, or I'll think negative. That's your number one thing, like for flow state, like you love skiing.
Yeah.
You know, so it's all about our experiences. But for me, the unworthiness part, I think, hit the most being raised in a very fundamentalist Christian home. You're never good enough. There's so many sins out there and you're always sinning, you know, and in these sins, like, and you got to be careful because the devil will have you sin like all different kinds of ways. You don't even realize it, you know. It's almost like the devil becomes the ego, you know, that whole thing. But for me, it was like and then the hellfire brimstone preaching, and you always felt guilt and shame, and you never felt good enough. I'd never felt like, here I am, a 12-year-old boy, and I discover my penis. But you can't do that. That's a sin. So then I'm just constantly, you know, as a 12-year-old boy, I mean, I'm not being too graphic here, but you know what a 12-year-old boy does.
You sit a lot.
You were one. Yeah. You're just sitting a lot. And then all of a sudden you start looking at girls, you know, and then it's like, oh, I never noticed that on a girl before, you know, at 12 and 13. So I got all this guilt and shame, and then I'm going to the altar and praying, you know, and asking for, and I'm crying and asking for, you know, am I even saved? Am I going to go to heaven? I'm probably going to go to hell because, you know, I looked at a girl's ass. You know what I mean? And so then I got to go repent for that. And it's just all this constant of just repenting and going through this whole process. And so it developed in me this sense of unworthiness. And so it got to the point, and here's where addiction happens in my life in different formats, not in alcohol or drugs, but other ways. My unworthiness would be like, well, fuck it. I'm unworthy, so just fuck it.
Yep. Exactly.
And then guess what happens? Major destructive behavior. Yeah. I'm talking torching things. You know how many relationships that I feel sorry for with girls that I were in where I just torched the thing? I was like, okay, you want to have wordplay here? Okay. And then I'm talking like physical, none of that, ever that. But it was like words that hurt. Yeah. That is the things that I said, you can't go back from. You know, I would just, okay, I'm hurting inside, so I'm just going to throw a whole word salad torch and just flamethrow. And I'm going to be super self-destructive, all because I did not believe I was worthy of love. You know, and I think this is really important because the material says keeping us stuck in the cycle of addiction.
Yes.
That's the problem.
Yes, I don't have the tools to break free from this cycle. I'm unworthy. We also understand we're powerful creators, whether we're conscious of it or not. So I start creating environments where I'm going to feel unworthy. Of course, I'm going to have a relationship that falls apart. I couldn't possibly be deserving of a real relationship, a loving, healthy relationship. So I'm going to attract and create an environment where I get the blowtorch things. Why? Because I'm used to blowtorching things.
Trauma bonding.
It's exactly right. Trauma bonding. And again, this is the pair of glasses that come down over my eyes. That was not what I chose. I didn't choose that. That would never be what I signed up for. The ego wants the best for us, but often produces the worst. That's the same as the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We don't really care what your intentions are, not in a spiritual lifestyle. In a spiritual lifestyle, we're very concerned with what your feet do. What do your actions say? Do your actions say you love me? Do your actions say this is a safe environment? Do your actions say I can just be who I am? No, my actions never said that. My actions said you need to be this way in order for me to be okay. If it's not, I'm Wile E. Coyote. I'm going to blow it up. I had the same experience over and over and over again.
Isn't it funny that we seek a safe environment? That's so beautiful what you said. Isn't it funny that we seek a safe environment and then we're not safe at all?
No.
I mean, it's not safe to be in a relationship with us and our addiction.
It's not safe in my mind.
I mean, it's safe now for me, I believe, but
yes, I believe
because of my spiritual practices and stuff like that. But, you know, 10 years ago, it was not safe to be in a relationship with me.
No, my mind is not a safe place.
But I was seeking safety all the time. And I thought that externally I could get into this or this. And that goes into the second part. It says not only does it, this unworthiness of love, happiness, and recovery, at the same time, the ego can fuel our addictive behaviors as we seek external validation and escape from feelings of inferiority or inadequacy. So this is nailing me. Like this material right now is just hitting me so hard. I got the 2x4, the spiritual 2x4.
Dead to rights here.
So the ego can fuel our addictive behaviors as we're seeking external validation, because the unworthiness seeks the validation.
That's also part of my ego can dress it up. It looks good. Look at him. He's the best employee we have. He works every day. And I don't care a damn about this job. I want your validation. If I don't have your validation, I don't have self-worth. It's very difficult to articulate that in a unconscious behavior. There's no way I will ever articulate that. I'm just killing myself working all the time.
But people don't even realize this. The cruel father that I had, or the cruel mom that I had, not me personally, but like if you have that, you seek that in bosses.
Oh, absolutely.
So you want the boss that at any moment is going to go off the handle and tell you, fire you or whatever, and you're all nervous about it. Or you had a bad mom, so all of a sudden your bosses are all women, and you're feeling like they're all mean to you.
Yes, because I'm unconscious and I'm a powerful creator. So I'm creating the unconscious trauma that I'm used to. Mine, which was a big deal for me, and it will continue to be a big deal. I still work on this daily. Is the fear of outshining others. I was born and I instantly outshone members of my family. I got more attention. I got more love. I got more kisses. I got more presents just by the fact of being born. As a result, I was treated differently. As a result, I was punished. So I had this unconscious imprint of needing to get in trouble for doing well. I would do really well and over and over and over again put myself in positions where people were going to punish me as a result of my success.
That's so wild.
Coming from vertical dimension first, coming from spirit first. I love my parents. No one can ever behave past their point of awareness. So I can't take the victim role anymore because my parents did the best they could with what they had. Mm-hmm. No one is ever going to behave beyond their point of consciousness. And I have excellent parents. I love them very much today. We have a wonderful relationship today. But seeking an environment where I was going to be in trouble for doing well, I cannot begin to understand that or even know I'm doing it if I'm coming from my ego. Because being in an environment where I'm doing well, my ego is pushing that, do well, you're the best. And then getting in trouble, my ego is pushing that too, because now it's all about me. Can you believe how she behaved? Can you believe they want to do this? Can you believe they're going to fire me because I'm the best one they have? And can you believe? And it's still all about me. So learning to detach from that, not coming from ego first, coming from spirit first, is a fascinating adventure. It's probably going to take the rest of my life. However, I'm willing to go down that path now because I'm not willing to get in trouble for doing well anymore. I'm taking my power back, owning the God consciousness inside of me. I'm not the situation of behaving well and getting in trouble. I'm not the energetic emotion of anger. What am I? I'm the aware space that gets to deal with both those things. So in that moment, I'm separate.
And so in your zone of genius and your creativity, it allows you the freedom to expand.
The key word there is freedom. Mm-hmm. In that moment, I'm free. You're exactly right. I don't want to go through the world in the bondage of self. We are so free we can choose bondage. But that's usually unconscious. So I do want to go through the world a free man, taking responsibility, owning my delusion, choosing to come from source first gives me a good chance, gives me a shot. And interestingly enough, we discussed this too. How many thoughts a day do I have? On average, 60,000. If I'm a high functioning addict, it's probably more like 70. I have 70,000 opportunities a day to take responsibility and come from source first. Have source forefront. That's a better way of living.
Yeah, and it's so crazy. And the material talks about it, says the ego, when unchecked, can thus lead to self-destruction. Recognizing and understanding the role of ego in addiction is a critical first step towards recovery. The ego unchecked, and you had talked about this, I mean, being in the hospital or whatever, leads to self-destruction. That's where it goes.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to realize your ego unchecked will lead to self-destruction.
Even though I know the God consciousness part of me knows it's killing me, ego and addiction doesn't care. I'll do it even if it's going to kill me. And this is going to, there are people that are listening now that will resonate. And this is, important if there's a window of grace and you can hear it. That's usually when it's time to make a decision. Let's go on to the bitter end. Am I going to continue and do this and die? Or am I going to make a decision and try and do something different? We're here to say something different is available for you. I don't have to continue my destructive path of delusionment. I can choose to live a different way of life.
Yeah, and that's that stage of change.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that self-destruction when you're in the hospital bed or you're blacked out laying in a ditch judging people's shoes or whatever it may be, you've become 400 pounds and the doctor's told you, like my addiction with food, you've become 400 pounds, and I used to be way heavier than I am now, but because I sought comfort in food, so that would help my pain just like a bottle did for you. Whenever you're in that self-destructive mode and ego is just full reign, there's no point of living. Like when I would get into those moments, it would just be like, well, I'm going to die early.
Yeah.
One of my friends used to always tell me, I'm not going to live past 30 anyways.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of, the ego even puts these, Jesus only lived to 32 or whatever, so if I make it to 30, I'm doing pretty good.
It's wild how we are not unique. Even in our selfishness, I'm still not unique. I never expected to live past 23.
Yeah, I hear that a lot.
I never expected to live past 23. So my suffering does not make me unique. However, that type of lifestyle, that destructive, addicted lifestyle, it's not worth living.
Right.
The God consciousness inside of me knows this is not my choice. And we obviously don't recommend this. We recommend recovery. But the God consciousness inside of me knows death is actually an improvement to that type of existence.
Yeah. And that happens. You get a new meat suit.
Yep.
You can be starting this all over again.
Yep.
You're just playing the same game level because you didn't beat the dragon at the end. So you're just going to play that level again in a different meat suit. And this is a part, it says, goes right into, it's so beautiful that you said this. It says, it sets the stage. So think about setting the stage. It sets the stage for the essential process of surrender.
Powerful.
Yeah, which involves letting go of our ego-driven desires and behaviors, accepting the reality of our addiction, and opening up ourselves to the possibility of change and healing.
Wow. It's beautiful language. In order to be born into something new, my old self has to die. In order to be willing to go through that death, takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of faith, takes a lot of willingness. If I'm in my addiction and unconscious, I don't have faith, I don't have courage, I don't have willingness. So I believe there's this moment of grace, we've talked about it before, that's presented to us, that we can step through this little window where we can muster enough courage, we can muster enough faith, we can muster enough willingness to start taking those actions.
So it's almost like a prison with a very small window in it. I'm picturing in my brain, like with the cinder blocks and there's just like the mold and there's rats running around. And I've been in this prison for years. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden I look at the window and I said, there's no bars on that window. Maybe I can break it. I wonder if I can squeeze through.
Yeah.
You know, it's that moment. And this is the cool part. When the surrender process, and we're going to get heavy into surrender the next, we're going to do a couple podcasts on surrender, but it's this process of admitting that you're powerless over it. You know, that's the process of saying, you know what? The life that I'm living is self-destruction and unmanageable.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to admit to myself that it's not all about me and I can't fix this. That's who I am right now. Jason Rigby right now cannot fix this issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. To get to that place is so difficult. And usually, again, all it takes is everything we got. In that moment, have to be willing to put my ego aside. Source is screaming so loud. We need you to put us first. For once, please put us first. In that moment of putting source first, I can allow this idea of I'm not King Duane, I don't have it in. That's one of my favorite definitions of admission. When they give you a ticket at the movie theater and it says admit 1, that means I got let in to the theater. They let me in. So I have to let that in to the part of me that is not ego, to the part of me that is source. I have to absorb that. I have to surrender to the fact that I can't do this.
That's crazy. Well, we're going to get into the next episode. We'll get into the surrender side of things and understanding a little bit more and giving you some tools. If you're at that window of grace right now that may be in your life, I encourage you to delve into this. I mean, you could study on your own. There's thousands of programs out there that you can be a part of. There's hotlines that you can call. We are not like medical professionals. All we're doing is just sharing our, we're not certified anything or anything of that. All we're doing is just sharing our journey and sharing what is going on in our lives and kind of trying to be honest and transparent and hope that helps you. But if the best thing that you can do for us before we close out, Duane, is I want people to understand sharing this. That's all we ask of you, is to share this with others. If you know somebody, if this has helped you and you know somebody that has addiction, just take the time to just send them the link. You don't know. Maybe they'll laugh at you. Who cares? Maybe they'll be like, why are you sending this to me? Or maybe they'll be like, thank you so much. And most people are going to be like, thank you. You know, I needed that. I needed to hear that. Also, we're on Instagram. We're on YouTube. Leave a comment on YouTube. I saw that there was a bunch of comments there today. And I love the comments, and we'll do some answering the comments. That'll be a fun show where we can, answer the comments. Some of them were funny, which I love.
Good.
I love some good sarcasm and stuff like that. But you can DM us at our Instagram channel, and if you have any questions, we would love to be able to answer them and just share our journey.
Excellent.